Hello there and welcome. In this video I got you 10 different tips and tricks for base defense in Dwarf Fortress. We're going to be talking about various things that you can use to keep enemies out, to kill enemies, and generally keep your people inside the fort alive and happy. So let's get started with number 1. Locking down your fortress is the most powerful way of defending yourself. Therefore, however you build your fort, include a couple of bridges that you can just link together with a lever into a indestructible wall. Build in a couple of doors that you can just forbid to keep enemies outside. Once you have entrances lockable to all outside connections of the world, be it subterranean or on the surface, you can decide for yourself when to deal with which problem. And I gotta say, sometimes travelers come on by and kill the problems for you. There's always plentiful options, but my standpoint remains, if you keep the enemy out of your fort, you have already the first step to victory in your hands. Number 2. Boulder Traps. So these are the weakest traps that you can build. They consist merely out of a mechanism and a boulder. These just fall down on the enemy, are reusable, rearmable, and utterly weak. They are okay against everything which is not large and or well equipped. Armor basically makes these boulders very easily neglectable, and they are also really easily evadable. So as you see here, I'm not talking particularly good about these, but when you're just new to the area where you are at, you can use these. These are also extremely cheap, but labor intense. Refilling these traps requires your dwarfs to carry around boulders, and these are among the slowest carryable items in the game. So altogether, I don't use them too much, except for when I really feel pressed to have some defenses really early on. Best served in narrow corridors, like here. Which brings me directly to number 3, prison corridors. So sometimes you can just enable an area where your enemies will draw in, and if we put up a bridge here and a bridge there, we can trap the enemy inside this corridor. You can construct things like these basically everywhere you want. You can do this down below in the caverns, for example, to lock in forgotten beasts. This is a really cool way to get yourself some pets that you can get onto the enemy and such. When you want to be hosting prison corridors, I have no good example here. One thing is really important: don't make them too small. You need a long range where the entirety of the enemy forces can run into, if you want to use that for sieges. And if you want to use it for forgotten beasts, my recommendation is a rope and a chain, and put a animal that you can expend on that rope and chain. The forgotten beasts have a tendency to look for something to kill, and this way you can nudge their pathing towards your prison corridor. Number 4, weapon traps. So these are basically the most deadly and appealing weapons that you can use. They can host up to 1 to 10 weapons in one slot. These weapons don't get used up. From time to time they need to be declocked from bodies that pile up in there. So there is a little bit of a labor intense work here involved. They don't kill your own people, don't you worry at all. And the best part about these is you can use pilfered weapons that you can use yourself, like large weapons and such. And you can also, as you see here, make trap parts out of glass. Glass is an endless resource, and if you are running Magma, it is basically only labor turned into weapon. These are particularly deadly, but also keep in mind evadable. As all traps, forgotten beasts and demons can completely ignore these, which is also a problem why these are no non plus ultra, but they work really well against sieges. These things slice enemies apart quite easily. Rack up enough of these in a long corridor and you have a very, very potent way of defending yourself. And like I said, the best part is you can afterwards build even more of these by just putting the weapons that you have plundered into the new traps. So, number 5, bridges. I already mentioned that bridges are a good wall, so something like this here can be used to seal off your fort for an indefinite amount of time. But here we have a retractable bridge. This one, if we flip the switch, the entity in question will fall down. If you want to use bridges as a fall trap, you need a large and long bridge, because the problem is there is a slight time delay when you flip the switch between the bridge, the flipping of the switch and the retracting of the bridge. So in short, if the bridge is not long enough, the enemy will be already past the bridge when it disappears. Therefore, a bridge, for example, of this length would be ideal to drop them into the waters down below. If you want to use bridges as parts of your traps, always keep in mind, flipping of a switch comes not only with a time delay of somebody walking to the switch, which you could disable by locking people into the room, but after flipping the switch there is a time delay which can ruin your entire plan. Therefore, plan them long enough. Number 6, soldiers. I mean, soldiers are by far the most destructive way of defending your fort. Put soldiers on entrances and exits of your fort to have the best opportunities to just kill enemies that come too close. I also like to put soldiers into the center of my cities when they are large enough, because sometimes when a tavern brawl or something like that boils up, it is really good to have heavily armed forces to shut down the combat quickly. Altogether, soldiers at entrance and exits, I mean, I don't really must explain much more than that. It's the typical gate guardians, and you should include them to your design. It's really, really powerful. So, number 7, drowning or magma chambers. So, chambers like these, for example, if we lock the doors, invaders can't really exit anymore. We'd need a hatch for this one. All we'd need then would be a room that contains a liquid up above, be it flammable or water, and then you just use a switch that is linked to the hatch, and then you can just flood the chamber. What you will need is the preparation to have a room large enough again to host the invading force before they sweep through, and you need a large reservoir of fluid up above, and you need a drain afterwards, because after the enemy is drowned, burned, or whatever, you need to get rid of the fluid again. These systems are impressive, powerful, devastating, and a lot of work. If you have pump stacks running and or other ways and means to refill the fluids quickly, that's pretty nice, but also the flushing process and everything is quite a lot to do, but not gonna lie, it's one of the most satisfying ways of getting rid of invaders. Number 8, drop traps. So with these I mean traps that strike when an enemy falls down. I have here made a vague impression of that with the retractable bridge, which is too short, like I said, to put people down there. That would be just the inverse drowning trap that I described here. But you can also use steep drops as a weapon. There's 2 ways and means to do that primarily. For one, there's the upright weapon / spike trap. Put these on the ground where you expect enemies to fall down towards to, and they deal a devastating amount of damage. If nobody falls down on them, they're effectively useless, making them the most niche trap of all of them. The other variant that you got is to do the drop without a trap, but using the most heavy rock that you have available to yourself. Interestingly enough, the density, the weight of the stone, does matter a lot when it comes down to dropping down on it. So Pitch Blender, for example, is one of the heaviest rocks in the game. Make a floor out of that, drop the enemy down on that, they suffer. Works also with lead, because lead obviously is also one really heavy metal from the galena ore. But whatever you do, if you want to generate a fall trap that really hurts, the floor must be heavy and hard too, or you use them spikes. The opposite is also true. If you make a flooring out of extremely lightweight material, like featherwood or something like that, it lowers the amount of fall damage. So you can even make falls more survivable like that. It's not a trap, it's not a defensive measure, but I wanted to mention it. So, number 9, cage traps. I deem these probably the most overpowered traps in game. You just put up a cage trap, mechanism, cage, and then it looks like this. Entity walks over the cage, trap springs, cage is down, enemy defused. Works for Cyclops, dragons, and way too many large enemies. You can defuse so many encounters with that, because once the enemy is in the cage, it's effectively inert. It's not gonna do anything. Time's standing still for anybody sitting in a cage, and therefore, yeah. If you want to make a fortress really cheesy, squeaky safe, you just put up a lot of cage traps there, and you dispose the inhabitants of the cages from time to time at your local magma pool of your trust. Just don't toss fire-resistant things in there. Might not be working. But apart from that, cage traps are so powerful that I, in recent runs, have avoided using them altogether because they trivialize pretty much all of the more interesting encounters. Here again, doesn't work against titans and forgotten beasts because these are effectively immune against traps. Of the mechanical sort, that is. And number 10, the last thing that I want to point in here is when you get attacked as a defensive measure, weave in burrows to make sure that your civilians are out of harm's way. I usually paint my burrow environment just somewhere where I have a lot of living area, a dining hall, and a tavern, so people have food and drink for the time being, and the military people stay upstairs. Burrows are not really quickly enough triggering for my taste. More often than I like it, some civilians just get the memo latest and they still linger in the zone of conflict, but it lowers the civilian losses by a ton. Because one thing I need to stress out, in any confrontation in Dwarf Fortress, it is a weird thing. Those fighters with those legendary skills, they go through enemies like a scythe through grass. Non-fighters, well, they just die like flies once there's one armed goblin somewhere. Sometimes a dwarf excels at fighting who didn't learn it and suddenly punches their head off out of some weird occasion, but don't rely on that. Usually if there's no fighter around, stuff gets ugly really quickly, people get unhappy, tantrum spirals might emerge. Therefore, burrows. Burrow down your people when you get attacked into a certain region. It just is so much worth it. Now then, that's the most effective things that I know about defending your fortress. Hope you found them helpful. There is an update for sieges and such on the horizon. I will update this guide accordingly once this update has hit town, but as the things stand right now, this is what we are working with. Thanks for watching. Drop me a note down in the comment section if you feel like I have forgotten something. I'm really interested to hear your opinion. And of course, leave a like, leave a subscribe. Feel free to support the channel financially via donations, subscriptions, or whatever tickles your fancy. That is found in the description box below. Thanks a lot for your support. All of you who do, I really appreciate, my family as well, and of course a big thanks for watching this video up until the very end. Appreciate you taking your time through all the ad rolls and my own ads and whatnot. Thanks, really mean it. Hope you found this video helpful, and have a great day.